सहनावतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति। कृपयाविष्टम् अश्रुपूर्णाकुलेक्षणं विषीदन्तमिदं वाक्यम् उवाच मधुसूदनः। श्रीभगवानुवाच कश्मलमिदं विषमे समुपस्थितम् अनार्यजुष्टमस्वर्ग्यम् अकीर्तिकरमर्जुन। क्लैब्यं मास्मगमः पार्थ नैतत्त्वय्युपपद्यते। हृदयदौर्बल्यं त्यक्त्वोत्तिष्ठ परन्तप। अर्जुन उवाच भीष्ममहं संख्ये द्रोणं च मधुसूदन। प्रतियोत्स्यामि पूजाः वरिसूदन। तानि महानुभावान् श्रेयो भोक्तुं वैश्यमतीतलोके। कामांश गुरूनिहैव भुञ्जीय भोगान् रुधिरप्रदिग्धान्। कतरन्नो गरीयः नो जयेयुः। प्रमुतेर्दार्तराष्ट्राः ब्रूहि तन्मे शिष्यस्तेऽहं शाधिमां त्वां प्रपन्नम्। शोकमुच्छोकनमिन्द्रियाणाम् राज्यं सुराणामपि चाधिपत्यम्। संजय उवाच एवमुक्त्वा हृषीकेशं गुडाकेशः परन्तप। इति गोविन्दम् बभूवः। च हृषीकेशं रहसन्निव भारत। उभयोर्मध्ये सीदन्तमिदं वचः। The chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya means knowledge, the yoga of knowledge. One of the largest chapters. Chapter 18 and chapter 2 are largest, 72 and 78 verses. Sankhya means knowledge. All human thoughts can be divided into two fundamental types. One set about knowledge, another set about action. Sankhya says knowledge and understanding is enough unto itself. You don't need anything more than that. Another set says there is no use in simply knowledge, talking. What is the use? Unless it can be manifested into action. Unless it can be translated into action, what is the use of knowledge? Therefore, there is always all human thoughts is fundamentally of these two types. Is knowledge, or depending upon your personality type, you will be attracted to that. That's all. Depending upon your personality type, you will be attracted to one. Nevertheless, per se, knowledge is always of the highest. Per se, if you were to analyze between action and knowledge is always of the highest. Not because we are studying knowledge, we are saying knowledge is of the highest. How do you understand knowledge is of the highest? Sankhya Yoga. And always they place this knowledge slightly on a higher pedestal. You say action and all is okay, but then knowledge is always likely. And throughout the Gita, you find, even though he talks about action, every now and then he is tilting towards knowledge. So, first thing that you need to understand about knowledge is all human thoughts can be divided into basically two types. One is an accent and focusing on the knowledge. There is another type which is on the action. You bring an active type here, an action type here. He will say, what are you people doing week after week? Sitting and talking, and nothing is happening except wasting electricity and bill. That's all. Might as well go and do something. So one type is predominantly the accent is towards, and then there is another type, the predominantly towards the knowledge type. Arjuna is being the action type. To that active type, actually Sankhya Yoga should have come last. See, it is exactly like this. Krishna doesn't know the technique of shopkeeping. You go to the shop, you ask for something, the shopkeeper will show you what? The best will not come first. The best is always hidden. First, what he will show you? That which is not getting sold. So somehow he will try to convince you that take it. For that very stubborn customer who refuses to all this, finally with lot of reluctance and irritation, he will pull out the best. And here you find Krishna doing exactly the opposite. He starts with the highest. When Arjuna is in no condition to receive knowledge, Krishna starts with the highest. Actually speaking, Sankhya Yoga should be the end. Not only that, verses 11 to 30, he talks about the indestructibility of the embodied. He talks about the self. To the person who is completely finished, instead of telling him something, he exposes him to the highest knowledge. Since he was in no condition to receive, he gave him the highest. Why? Because he will not interfere and ask. Any clarifications. He will simply look at him. So he can just say all that he wanted to say. right up to 53 he takes. From the indestructibility to enlightenment he takes. Not that Arjuna gets inspired by enlightenment, a very petty ordinary curiosity. Now describe an enlightened person. No. Sthita Prajna verse 54. First time he will interfere and ask this question. Describe an enlightened, again 54 to 72, description of an enlightened person. Then Arjuna wakes up and asks this question in third chapter. I am going one chapter, I am coming one chapter behind. The question that Arjuna asks in third chapter, I am starting chapter 2 now. Because in chapter 2, he talks about the glory of knowledge so much that in chapter 3, he starts by saying, if knowledge is so important, then let us go back to knowledge. It's an indication what Arjuna didn't hear. The very question of Arjuna itself is an indication that he didn't hear one word of chapter. The question that he asked, if action, what you need to understand is, throughout Arjuna's question, there is a hidden psychological teaching. You conclude first and then you pretend to ask a question. First conclusions are made and then there is a pretension to ask question. Conclusions are made, justifications follow later. Like, for example, you get angry. You have lost your, supposing you get angry, temporarily you became insane. After a few minutes, you repent also and say, I am sorry. You know, the situation drove me like this. You know, I had a very bad day in the office, traffic jam, this. When I was so irritated, you just said that word no. I just lost my cool, lost my temper. And the man repents, says sorry, and gets angry again tomorrow. If there is a right understanding, in that Janma he cannot get angry again. The very fact, if there is a right understanding, repeating will not happen. But then we do something and we go on repeating not only that, the man feels what is a very humble person also, because he had asked sorry. You know, in spite of all this I have asked sorry, why don't you? In and through all that, what is the pretension? I have to justify that how my anger is. I have to say how my anger is. In that understanding that my anger is correct, I will go on getting angry right till the end of my life, because I have decided what did I understand? That anger of mine is justified. Not only it is justified, sir, it is for the benefit of the other only. Not only my anger is correct, it is justified. How it justified? It is for the benefit of the. Arjuna thought like that. But you can't escape Krishna's penetrative vision. You can't escape his penetrative vision. And Krishna touches that spot directly in him. In verse number 2, Krishna touches that spot directly in him. Immediately you will find Arjuna start defending the same thing that he says in chapter 1. You should follow the sequence right up to verse number 10. From verse number 11 length we are free. Nothing will matter. How can you get verse number? Still remember when we are doing in chapter 2, he always says verses 11 to 30 get by heart. Every day repeat it. Someday these 20 verses, one verse will come because the entire knowledge is in that 20 verses. Verses 11 to 30. It's called the indestructibility of the. Before getting into that, Arjuna still continues. How he continues? Krishna touched that spot. The moment you touch that spot in the other, that's all you need to do. The other, there is a necessity to to justify, to defend. What is the defense? Again Arjuna, again Krishna goes into why this highest knowledge is given to Arjuna. Number one, all sorrow, all suffering is because of ignorance. The sorrow can be due to any external factor, but the true reason, the real reason, the only reason for sorrow and pain and agony and suffering is ignorance. So every time a human being approaches, the master starts giving out the highest first, because in that lies the true solution. Chances are the person can wake up and receive it. Chances are the person can continue in the old way of thinking. When he sees him continuing in the old way of functioning, he starts coming down. He starts coming down. There you find from chapter 3 Krishna coming down. Not only that, it is the knowledge, it is the expression of the highest knowledge inspires the other to listen. All along, excuse me, all along, Arjuna was looking at Krishna as a childhood friend. That's where in chapter 11, when he says the Vishwarupa Darshana, Arjuna says, "Oh, sorry, in our childhood in ignorance I called you, hey Krishna and all that, don't get angry and punish me. Now forgive me for all that." In chapter 11, Arjuna talks all that, when he got so scared by that Vishwarupa Darshana. So all along, as far as Arjuna is concerned, Krishna is only a friend. At the most a wise friend, that's all. But nevertheless, friend. Friend means equal. Friend means equal. What I know, he knows. That's all. There is no difference. Friend means he will not be able to listen to Krishna, or Krishna will not be able to inspire. So the way that Arjuna can be inspired is expose him to because in and through all these, Arjuna has some shades of seeking also. That's why he is reacting. Supposing if that indestructible embodied and all this chapter 2 is given to Duryodhana or Yudhishthira, they would have said, first let us get into fight, finish it off, and then we'll come back. See, no one had a doubt. Duryodhana didn't have a doubt. Yudhishthira also didn't have a doubt whether we should fight or not. Who got into this doubt? Arjuna alone got into this doubt. When the whole lot in the battlefield was clear that fight is the right thing to be done, Arjuna alone got into this doubt. It means there is an element of it shows that there is an element of seeking in him. What does that element of seeking in him means? Element of seeking is nothing but always giving room for maybe I am wrong. That's all it is. Self-error. Maybe I could be wrong. That room Arjuna was having. That's why he had a doubt. What is the doubt? Whether this fight is justified or not, whether this fight is right or not. Not that he has understood the futility or anything, but then there is an element of seeking left. And Krishna wanted to capitalize on that and quickly turn Arjuna to get inspired. So what he did, straight away he started with the verses 11 to 30, the highest. 3 verses from Kathopanishad bodily lifted and quoted. 3 verses from the Upanishad. You find some verses in Bhagavad Gita literally taken from. Only thing he doesn't say is, I am quoting Kathopanishad. It's exactly the same. And suddenly that that aspect of seeker in Arjuna was bright enough for a moment, became brightened for a moment. Then he was able to have a conversation. What is the conversation? He justifies first and then he asks. He justifies first and then he asks. In the case of an ideal student, there is no justification. Straight away the question is, all that I know is ignorance. What is true? Knowledge. Straight away there is no explanation of trying to justify how his ignorance is also. What Arjuna does in chapter 1 and the first 10 verses of chapter 2 is, he continues doing what? He gives justifications, he gives arguments, because there is the fundamental necessity in every human being to justify the action. It's a necessity. That's where even the child has a reason to, you talk to the child. Child also can give a reason as to why it did. Because there is this inherent necessity to justify. Invariably where the trouble comes is, this justification happens through the medium of likes and dislikes. I like to do this and I pretend that it is the highest thing to do. I want to harm the other, but I pretend that it is the beneficial thing for the other. Therefore I am doing it. You follow what I am saying? Because there is a fundamental necessity to justify. That's where even you talk to an insane man, he also has reasons. Talk to anyone, a child, 2-year-old child, it will also have enough. It means what? It is the justification that you give convinces you about the very action itself. The justification that you are giving to the action is wrong now. Sankhya Yoga comes and says, the justifications that you are giving for your actions, they are all completely wrong, because all your justifications arises from your likes and dislikes. I like to steal, I can justify it by saying how stealing is right. Robin Hood is stealing, and you can give enough justifications to prove how stealing is right. You don't like stealing, again you can give justifications too. Therefore, there is this inherent urge in a human being for knowledge. There is this inherent urge in a human being to use knowledge. So what Krishna says, instead of using your likes and dislikes, use the true knowledge, use the real knowledge. What is the real knowledge? The highest. Sankhya Yoga, the highest knowledge. Sankhya means, the literal meaning of the word Sankhya means to discriminate. Again I repeat, the literal meaning of the word Sankhya means to discriminate. That's where the Sankhya Yoga is called Buddhi Yoga also. You have heard of Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and what is Buddhi Yoga? He uses the word Buddhi Yoga. Sankhya means, the word Sankhya means discrimination. What is the discrimination? The discrimination between Prakriti and Purusha. The discrimination between the higher and the lower. That which clearly discriminates, that which clearly exposes what is higher, what is lower is discrimination. That is called Sankhya. Now what he is doing in chapter 2, he is only clearly distinguishing. What is the distinction? All the justifications that you are giving Arjuna, he is not. Arjuna also thought he was analyzing. Arjuna also thought he was giving logic and reason. Now how do you decide, on what basis you decide whose reasoning is right and whose reasoning is wrong? On what is, there has to be some basis. For everyone, their reasoning is, their likes and dislikes are the, you follow what I am saying? That's where literally there is no connection at all between two human beings. Even though we look like we are all connected, we have a relationship, we have an association. Factually speaking, there is no relation, there is no association. See, that man famous psychologist, wrote a book about his patients, about the various patients that he encountered. In that, he writes about two professors. He had so many insane people as his, because our psychiatrists who will have patients, all insane people, and two professors. And it is true also, of all the people, professors are more likely to go mad very fast. Why? The same knowledge that can liberate you, if you don't understand, the same knowledge becomes a burden. That's why here he says, don't take knowledge beyond your absorption capacity. You will go mad. He said, after gaining knowledge, you start seeing shades of insanity in everyone. Because of what? Because absorption is, yes. And who is a professor? Who is a professor? Professor, na? One who professes. One who claims that he knows. Actually he doesn't know. But he goes on claiming that. So, two professors he had. And that man writes about he overheard these two having a conversation. They were talking the most profound subjects. They were talking. When one man was talking, the other man was keeping quiet. As soon as the first man finishes, Professor B starts. Totally unconnected to what? A web. Half an hour. That man could not manage. He came in and said, I have a question to you. First thing they asked, do you think we are mad? The professors asked him, do you think we are mad? He can't say obviously no, otherwise why will you be? No, I don't think like that. Now what is your question? I heard, I apologize. After overhearing for 30 minutes what they are gossiping, why do you have to go and say, I apologize for? So he said, I apologize for having heard, but then I couldn't manage, I came. What? You both were having a conversation. Are you aware that both were talking unconnected? The two professors looked at him and said, therefore you thought we are mad, no? He got stunned. He said, I didn't know how to. Not only that, second question, why, at least if there is an argument, both will talk simultaneously. One man was talking and the other man was nodding his head, pretending listening. He said, what is? First thing, we know the rules of conversation, he said. What is the rule of conversation? When one man talks, others should stay quiet. That's the rule of conversation. In fact, understand this. One man goes on talking one side, doesn't allow you to reply, doesn't allow you to talk back. What will you call that person as? What will you call that person as? Are you able to follow the question that I am asking? Sankhya Yoga la mutrungo. If you understand this, some stage of Sankhya will understand. One man is talking one way, not allowing you to talk. What will you call that person as? Very boring, sir. Why? Because he is only talking, not allowing you to talk. Imagine the same man, after talking for 10 minutes, allows you also to talk. What will you say? Very interesting conversation. So, rules of madness we have. Rules of conversation. Professor said, if this is the reason for madness, then everyone is mad. Carl asked him, how do you say this? As one is talking, you start talking simultaneously within your mind. Are you able to follow? When one starts talking, what the other does? You start talking inside. The moment the other keeps quiet, whatever you were thinking inside, you start talking. So literally there is no conversation between the two. If this is the reason for madness, then everyone is. Carl Utsav wrote that night in the diary. He said, I learned something from these two mad fellows. Mad professors. I learned something. What is it? From that day onwards, I started thinking, is there any connection between what I hear and what I... Most of the time it doesn't happen. One way the man talks, as soon as the other person starts talking, you stay quiet. Actually, you are not quiet. If you have a powerful observation skill, you can see the lip moving. You can see the movement of the lips. You can see the movement of the tongue also, because he is still, what is he doing? He is talking, waiting for you to stop. So he said, we have made an agreement, what? 10 minutes we will talk. He talks what he wants, I will talk what? Too much of knowledge you have. Don't forget the story. Why I said about this? About this professor, this story. When knowledge is there, minus that absorption, the very knowledge becomes a burden. The very knowledge becomes a burden to you. Not only that knowledge becomes a burden to you, that knowledge of yours will not inspire anyone outside. Versus the true knowledge, that Sankhya Yoga that Krishna is talking. The knowledge that he has is so inspiring. That's where we have teachers are more, students are less always. You know that? The proportion between the number of teachers and the number of students, teachers are more and students are less. Means what? Everyone wants to give a discourse. And every 2 months, 3 months, and one person I met was yesterday. After the class and all is over, he came to me and said, sir, when you are not in station, can I take class? I said, ask the host. If they say, take now, you take. Same thing happened in your house also. No, the man came, ask her. Man, I said, I don't decide. If the host says, you can come and teach now, go on teach. Because I don't decide who should teach, who should not. Only thing I will tell you is what? I will tell the people that it is your choice to come or not to come. I will not say every one of you must come and sit in the... It means what? Everyone wants to. Teachers are less, students are more. That's where any student comes, pounds on them and grabs them, because student is a very rare. Students are very rare commodity. Disciple is a very rare commodity. Gurus are in plenty. Correct. Gurus are always in plenty. And disciple is a very rare commodity. Where do you get that? Yeah. Anyone comes waiting. Yeah. We are also seeing, is there anyone coming or not? The knowledge is there, but that knowledge is a burden to you, burden to those around you, which is not knowledge. You follow the difference? Sankhya Yoga is not a knowledge of that type. Here is this knowledge that is knowledge means that which inspires. That is knowledge. Inspires for what? Inspires to evolve. Knowledge is that which inspires other to put in effort. Knowledge is that which inspires the other to put in effort. Effort for evolution. Effort for self-realization. But then, what is so much lacking is the effort part. So what is true knowledge? The true knowledge is that which inspires you to make an effort towards the higher. That's the most difficult thing. To inspire the other to make an effort. The only way that effort can be made by the human mind is it has to convert it into a likes and dislikes. Effort comes only after likes, and here is the knowledge that inspires you to put in that effort to seek when say seek the highest, means the readiness to make what is the readiness to make an effort means? Ready to stake everything for, readiness to risk everything Readiness to leave the comforts of all that you know. That is knowledge. Again I repeat. What is knowledge? Knowledge is that which inspires. Inspires for what? Inspires to make an effort. When you can inspire the other, when one can inspire the other? Only when you have it, or only when you have attained it. Otherwise you cannot inspire. You can go on giving discourses, but inspiration will not happen. Just as a beggar giving a discourse on how to become rich, will it inspire? A beggar giving a discourse on how to make money, how to become successful, will it inspire? Versus the richest man not even saying anything, just the very presence itself is. So inspiration comes from what? Inspiration comes from the attainment. Inspiration comes from the achievement. You follow what I am saying? Again I give the same example. The beggar is giving you a discourse on how to become rich. The auto driver giving a discourse on morality. Auto driver giving a discourse on all that, and then you look at the meters, it will not inspire you. You follow what I am saying? I said knowledge is that which inspires you to make an effort. Now the inspiration comes, you can inspire only when you have attained it. Therefore, transaction of knowledge is possible only through attainment. Transaction of knowledge is possible through attainment. And Krishna is an enlightened, not only is an enlightened master, he is very unique. Yeah. You never get a multi-dimensional aspect of perfection like Krishna. That's where Krishna is called Purna Avatar. All avatars are not, including Rama, he is not Purna Avatar. Why? Because you will never see Rama laughing. You can never accept Rama having a belly laughter. You cannot accept Rama. Rama means has to be serious, always serious. You feel like worshipping him and saying. Few years back in one of the law college where I was talking, I asked them, you know why Bhagavad Gita they swear upon? The witnesses they swear on? Not on Ramayana, not on Upanishad, not on everything but on Bhagavad Gita. At least you know that, no? So I asked them, why do they swear on Bhagavad Gita? Oh, that man who made the rule liked the text, Bhagavad Gita, and he made it. Witnesses have to swear on Bhagavad Gita, saying what? I am saying the truth. You know that? Has anyone gone as a witness to court for any case? Soladinga irunda kuda. Say. Then we will be scared because you don't want. I have gone witnessing. I know. Such a complete multi-dimensional aspect of perfection you find only in. Even a thief can find inspiration in Krishna. You are a musician, you can find inspiration in Krishna. You are a dancer, you can find inspiration in Krishna. You are a philosopher, you can find inspiration in Krishna. A dancer, make him sit in front of Rama, he will not know what to do. When all perfections are one dimension, Krishna comes with not only that, participating in everything, but never serious about. He did everything that ought to be done, but never serious about. The thought of doing it itself makes us so serious, so agitated, so disturbed, but not at all serious about. When that man speaks, it is very, very inspiring. And what will he speak about? He always speaks about the highest. That's why it's called. So the second chapter is called Sankhya Yoga. The yoga of. So the knowledge of Krishna comes from where? He is able to inspire Arjuna. Comes from where? Comes from his attainment. Therefore, experience comes first, understanding comes first, teaching comes. He is teaching what he is living. That's knowledge. Again I repeat. Why it's called Sankhya Yoga? The highest knowledge is because what he is teaching is what his experience. Since he is talking from that experience, there is you will find a conviction in that, an authority in that, and that conviction inspires, because the seeker is one who's seeking. A seeker is one who's ready to put the effort. A seeker is one who's ready to make the effort. He is not asking how to make the effort easy. That's not what he is asking. Whatsoever the difficulty is, the seeker is ready. Are you able to understand? A seeker is one who is ready for the effort. Howsoever tough it is, howsoever difficult it is, he is ready for it. All that he needs is what? All that he needs is an inspiration. And whatever that man speaks is an inspiration. Sankhya Yoga. The yoga of knowledge alone can inspire a man into action. If knowledge doesn't inspire you into action, what will inspire you into action? Likes and dislikes. And when likes and dislikes inspires you, it's a wrong word to use inspiration, because inspiration we use it in the positive sense. Yeah. Likes and dislikes drives you into action, and you will be under the burden of having to justify it. Right. That's where a man can lie and he has enough justifications to say how his lies are, how his lying is, and wants to harm. And he has enough justifications to say it's only for the welfare of. There is an inherent necessity to justify the action. What is the standard? Sankhya Yoga analyzes that. What is the standard for justifying the action? Is it your likes and dislikes, or is it something else? Is it your likes and dislikes, or is it something else? Sankhya Yoga says, analyzes both. First it analyzes the right thing. That is from verses 11 to 40, including the third topic, verses 11 to 40. And then he goes on to describe desire-ridden actions. 4 verses. Now, because we know it already. So, desire-ridden action he takes 4 verses. Then he gives the highest. What type of action will lead you to self-realization? And then the description of an enlightened man. And when you go and hear the description of an enlightened man, so fundamentally different from our concept of enlightenment, our concept of perfection. Enlightened man means, another word is, they will not use the word perfection, they will use the word enlightenment. They will never use the word perfection, because there is no such thing as perfection. Take it or leave it, it's a fact. The quickest way to become insane. There are various ways in which you can become insane. The fastest way, the quickest way, the easiest way to become insane is turn into a perfectionist. The moment you turn into a perfectionist, everything will appear wrong. Everything will appear imperfect. And anything that is imperfect is wrong. Now your standard of perfection has given you enough justification to abuse another. To abuse another. Because your abusing another has enough justifications. Where is the justification coming from? Again it's a deep-rooted again it is something deep-rooted. What is the deep-rooted thing? From your standards of perfection. And anything other than that is Anything other than that is imperfect, and imperfect means wrong, and you cannot tolerate anything wrong, because you can only accept what is right. You can accept what is. You cannot tolerate anything that is. If you can't tolerate anything that is wrong, you shouldn't be able to tolerate yourself first. The very fact that you can tolerate yourself, the very fact that you can accept yourself, there is no reason not to accept anyone else. If you can't accept anyone else, you should be able not to accept yourself. But then, very comfortable with my standards. You cannot escape Krishna's penetrative analysis. That's all I am trying to say. All that he is doing is what? We can have our own notions, but we cannot escape his penetrating. What is that? A description of an enlightened soul. And how he describes an enlightened soul? First he calls him as Sthita Prajna. He doesn't call him a perfect man. He calls him Sthita Prajna. Sthita Prajna means steady wisdom. Man of steady wisdom. Not Sunday morning wisdom. Otherwise it was Sunday morning wisdom, pockets wisdom. Yes, steady wisdom. But how do I know steady wisdom? Man who's got senses under his enlightenment. Because our notion of enlightenment makes us to believe he is very powerful, he'll become like this, he'll become like that, he will get it, he will not get it. And here he gives such a wonderful description of who's an enlightened. Vashehi yashendriyani tasya prajna pratishtita. Vashehi yashendriyani. 3 times he repeats in 20 verses. 3 times he repeats. Who is the man of enlightenment? Enlightenment. Why the senses are considered as enlightenment? That which you have taken it for granted is what brings your downfall. The senses is taken for granted that it can be easily mastered, controlled, because everyone thinks what I can control, sir, easily. It's no big. It has got nothing to do with the senses. It is something deeper. What is something deeper? That which brings your downfall is what? That which you think it's easy to handle is what brings your downfall. That's all he's saying. Are you able to follow? Are you able to follow what I'm saying? Or understand it like this. All your difficulties of today, all your problems of today came from, not from the doubts of yesterday, from the clarity of yesterday. Because you are so sure. And that turned into a problem. Therefore, who is an enlightened man? Who has this? What? That which brings your downfall is what? Is your so-called knowledge. That which brings your downfall is your so-called knowledge. That which you have taken it for granted. That's where all through the lectures, all through the discourses, like a lullaby, he sings one tune. What is the tune? Don't take things for granted. Don't take things for, almost like a lullaby it is now. Because you have heard it so much, he is going to say that is taken for granted. Yeah. Oh, he will say this only, correct. So that you don't have to. Meaning what? That which you take for granted, that which looks so obviously true, is that which brings you. Who's an enlightened man? Description of an enlightened. 72 is the broad outlook of this chapter called Sankhya. Sankhya means knowledge. Sankhya means to discriminate. What is the discrimination? Purusha and Prakriti. That's where whenever he talks about this discrimination between the higher and lower, Krishna always uses the word Sankhya. Listen to this wisdom of Sankhya Arjuna. Listen to this wisdom of Sankhya Arjuna. He keeps on saying. Sankhya means the discrimination. That discrimination. What is the discrimination? Prakriti and what is Prakriti made up of? Prakriti is the 3 gunas. Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Purusha is that which enlivens it, witnesses it. That is Purusha. Again I repeat, Prakriti is the three gunas. What are the three gunas? Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Whose Purusha? The enlivening factor, the witnessing factor. Witnessing while participating, while enlivening. So combine both. See, witnessing doesn't imply enlivening. Enlivening means not participating. If you want to understand Purusha, combine all this. You will be more confused. Don't worry. You will be more confused. While participating, there is witnessing. Participating in the sense, enlivening factor. That is Purusha. So knowledge distinguishes between the Prakriti and the Purusha. The Para and the Apara. The lower and the higher. Prakriti is Apara, lower. Purusha is Para, the higher. What is the nature of the Purusha? He describes first. And then from chapter 3 he goes on to describe the action. Action born out of Prakriti. Actions born out of Prakriti. Gunas. That's where he says actions are born out of gunas. Prakriti. That which is enlivening the Prakriti is Purusha. Therefore, first thing that you have to talk about is not Prakriti, the Purusha. Because why waste time talking about that which is not there? Therefore, the enlightened master talks about that which is there. If we fail to recognize, he comes down. Exactly like rope and the snake. The boy comes and says, there is snake, there is snake, there is snake. First thing that he tells, the first thing you tell him is, there is rope, there is no snake. But the boy is not able to understand that. Therefore, what happens when the boy expresses his incapacity to understand, then the whole discussion starts from the angle of what? From the snake. Okay, forget rope. Let us start from snake. Then the snake will be described. Everything about the snake will be dealt in detail so much that, oh my God, what a fantastic description. What a fantastic analysis about that which is not there. So in and through that, he goes on slipping it in. What? Even though all these analyses are done, don't get carried away by all this, because it is not. Therefore, true knowledge is to talk about that which is, and Krishna being an enlightened master talks about therefore he talking about the self. Indestructibility of the embodied means the enlivening. Having understood that enlivening factor, you do that which you ought to do, like a leela, like a sport, like a play, uninvolved, unattached. Therefore, the fourth topic, your duty is to act. Having understood this, what happens? Understanding Purusha doesn't stop the action. Understanding Purusha makes the action effortless. Again I repeat, when you understand the enlivening factor, that understanding of the enlivening factor, what it does to you? That understanding makes the action effortless. Effortless because or effort in action is because of what? The effort in action is because of what? Leaving aside the likes and dislikes. Expecting reward more closely. Now there is action and there is lot of effort involved in that action. True Sankhya says, you gain this knowledge, action becomes, it's not that action will stop, action will continue. But what will be removed? What will go away? The effort part of it goes away. Now the question is, what is bringing in the pain into action? What is bringing the effort in action? The pain, the sorrow, the suffering. What is it? The value for the result. The value for the result. It is the result that is more important, not the action. In fact, you are not interested in the action at all. In fact, you are not interested in the action. Action is used only for the result. Therefore, such a value you place for the result, that value that you place for the result brings a tremendous pressure into the very doing, into the very action itself. Therefore, first thing, when you understand Purusha, what drops? What drops? The value for the result drops. The value for the result is dropped, then what drives one to do what he is doing? Then what drives one? Doing for the sake of doing, that's all. There is no other reason to act other than the fact that you are, the only reason that you have to act is because you are still alive, that's all. As long as you are alive, you have to be in action. There is no other reason for action. But then, the action becomes so much painful, so much difficult, so much of agony, so much of stress that comes into action, not because of the action, because of the value that is placed for the result. You get the result. This is where Sankhya comes in. This is where knowledge comes in. You get the result. It's not that you don't get the result. You get the result. But your quality as a being remains the same. Getting the result doesn't change you as a person. How do you say that? How does one say that? How does one understand that? Of the 10 things that we want, 6, 7 we have got. It's not that we didn't get. Of 10 desires, 5, 6 gets. Even if that 5, 6 of fulfillment should have brought 60-70% of fulfillment, but still the unfulfillment is howsoever the result comes, the fulfillment doesn't come. Therefore, Sankhya analyzes action into 2. What are the 2? One is what is it that is driving it is your seeking fulfillment that is driving the action. Seeking fulfillment. Seeking fulfillment means there is a feeling of unfulfillment. There is a feeling of unfulfillment, and this feeling of unfulfillment drives the action, not seeking results, seeking fulfillment. Out of ignorance, it is misunderstood as the fruit. That's where so much of attention on the fruit. You follow what I am saying? The fruit comes to you, but what doesn't come? The fulfillment doesn't come. Even if it comes, even before you can actually know what that fulfillment is, it goes away. Even if there is a fulfillment, that fulfillment is also very, very limited, very temporary. You understand? Therefore, what Sankhya does, what knowledge does, it analyzes action and says that which drives the action is the unfulfillment part, and the unfulfillment part cannot be fulfilled by any amount of action. Any amount of action or any amount of result of the action. What is the result of the action? Acquisition. Therefore, in one word straight away he says, any amount of acquisition will not bring fulfillment. Will not bring fulfillment, because that which drives the action is not the result. That which drives the action is that unfulfillment, and that unfulfillment cannot find fulfillment through the result. Therefore, unfulfillment has to be understood. Unfulfillment cannot be found fulfillment. Unfulfillment has to be. That's where the Sankhya, that's where the knowledge comes. That's where knowledge comes first. What is the understanding of unfulfillment? The understanding of unfulfillment is imaginary. How do you understand the unfulfillment? So much of knowledge explanations are given to explain what? How the unfulfillment is imaginary. The day you understand all the problems that you face is because of your imagination, then what is the solution? Stop imagining. That day you understood it. As long as you don't understand that day you understand, if all the problems is because of your imagination, what is the solution? First he says, stop imagining, Arjuna. Where there is a rope, you are imagining a snake. Stop it. Arjuna says, but the snake is very frightening. Snake is very frightening. When Krishna goes on talking about the non-existence of the snake, Arjuna goes on talking about, are you able to understand? Krishna goes on talking about the non-existence of the snake right from the beginning till the end, and Arjuna goes on talking about the existence of the snake. Arjuna doesn't give up, Krishna also doesn't give up. Finally Arjuna gave up. Finally Arjuna gave up, because there's no way this man is going to stop, and the only way to make him stop is what? See, supposing Om Savana Bhavatu, we start. As soon as a prayer is over, in chorus, if everyone says, we have understood Bhagavad Gita, now what to do after that? What will we do? 10 minutes Talihe open 8 o'clock, only they will open. We have to, half an hour will time pass, and then we'll go on, have breakfast, and he's fatigued. He says, give up. Are you able to understand? Arjuna goes on asking questions. Arjuna goes on describing about the snake, and Krishna goes on saying, in and through the description of the snake, he comes back to the point of what? Saying there is no. As long as Krishna is describing the snake, Arjuna is very attentive. The moment he slips to that angle, what is that angle? But Arjuna, there is no. Arjuna says, that we will come to later. Let us discuss about the. It's exactly like the two professors talking. Yeah, he is talking one thing, and the other man is talking another thing, and both are having a conversation. The highest knowledge, the Sankhya, the yoga of very big chapter, 72 verses. One class one verse vecha kuda it will take 72. Eppo mudipoma, God only knows. One of the important chapters where he lays the blueprint of the entire Bhagavad Gita. The entire Bhagavad Gita he gives the blueprint. From chapter 3 is nothing but a reiteration and explanation, saying the same thing again and again and again of what is said in chapter 2. That's why it's called the yoga of knowledge. It's just the reiteration. He's going to say the same thing that he's saying, different words he uses, and we get carried away by the words, and we think there are 18 chapters. Actually speaking, there is only chapter 2 and repetition of. That's why it's called Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of